He stood in front of the mirror, staring into his own eyes like he was trying to recognize a stranger. The reflection looking back at him wasn't the man he used to know. His shoulders were heavier, his gaze dimmer, not from physical exhaustion, but from the silent weight of being unseen, unheard, and unappreciated by someone he had once given his heart to. He thought about all the times he bent his own rules just to keep the peace, all the times he let things slide because he was afraid of losing her. Every compromise had felt small at first, harmless, even noble. But now those small compromises had piled up into a mountain. Burying his self-respect beneath them, it wasn't anger that burned in his chest that day. It was clarity. A clarity that felt both liberating and terrifying. He realized that love without respect is nothing more than an illusion, a soft chain disguised as affection. He had been living in that illusion for too long, convincing himself that endurance was the same as loyalty and that patience was the same as love. But now he could see the truth. No matter how deep your love runs, if it flows through a place where you are not valued, it will eventually drown you. So he didn't yell. He didn't throw accusations or plead for understanding. He simply picked up his coat, put on his shoes, and walked out. Every step away from that door felt like both a loss and a gain. He had lost the comfort of her presence, the familiarity of her voice, but he had gained something far more important himself. For the first time in years, his heartbeat felt steady, like it belonged to a man who was no longer willing to trade his dignity for someone else's convenience. People didn't understand. They called him cold, distant, heartless. They whispered about how he had walked away from someone who loved him. But what they didn't see were the nights he spent lying awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment, asking himself if he had done the right thing. The silence wasn't peaceful at first. It was loud, filled with doubts and memories that clawed at him. There were days when he almost convinced himself to go back, to apologize, to accept less than he deserved just to end the ache. But then he remembered the feeling of shrinking, of swallowing his pride day after day until there was nothing left of him but a shell. Peace came slowly, like the morning sun after a long, cold night. And when it did, he realized that it was worth every lonely evening, every misunderstood decision. Because peace doesn't come from being loved, it comes from being respected, especially by yourself. And that was a price he was finally willing to pay. He could still remember the afternoon when his father's words first reached his ears. They were sitting outside on the porch, the sun slipping low, painting the sky in shades of gold. His father had spoken in that calm, steady voice that carried the weight of experience. Son, love is a gift, but respect is the foundation. Without the foundation, the gift will rot. Back then, he nodded politely, not fully grasping the meaning. He thought love could fix anything, that enough patience, enough sacrifice, enough forgiveness could turn anything into something beautiful. It took years, heartbreak, and countless moments of silent humiliation to understand what his father meant. When the realization finally came, it was like someone had pulled back a curtain he didn't know was there. He saw it all clearly now, the patterns, the excuses, the way he had allowed himself to be treated simply because he didn't want to lose the person he loved. He had mistaken endurance for strength, but strength wasn't about how much disrespect you could tolerate. Strength was knowing when to walk away from it, even if it meant walking into the unknown. That lesson wasn't easy, but it was one he carried like armor from that day on. As time passed, he discovered a quiet kind of power in letting go of the need to be understood by everyone. He stopped chasing explanations, stopped trying to prove to others that his worth was real. He learned that some people will only see you through the lens of what they can take from you, and if you don't protect yourself, they'll keep taking until there's nothing left. So he poured his energy into himself, his work, his health, his mind. Each day, he became a little stronger, not because he was trying to show the world what he could do, but because he was finally doing it for himself. The change didn't go unnoticed. The same people who once dismissed him now spoke to him differently. The ones who underestimated him began to watch him with a kind of reluctant respect. It wasn't that he had become someone else, he had simply stopped being the version of himself that allowed disrespect to thrive. Self-respect had turned him into a man no one could shake, a man who no longer bent to fit into spaces that were too small for him. And in that silence, in that uncheckable stance, he found a strength he had never known before. There were moments when the past crept in quietly, like an old song playing faintly in another room. Memories would surface without warning the way. She laughed when she was happy, the comfort of her hand in his. The way the world seemed to slow down in those rare, gentle moments. Those memories had a softness to them that made him pause, that almost convinced him that maybe he had been too harsh, too quick to let go. But right behind those warm moments came the shadows. He remembered the sharp edge in her voice when she spoke without care, the way she dismissed his opinions like they carried no weight, the countless times he felt small in the presence of someone who was supposed to lift him up. It was like remembering a house that looked beautiful on the outside, but inside the roof leaked and the walls were crumbling. It might feel safe on sunny days, but the moment the storms came, you were left exposed, shivering, and alone. That was the truth he could never forget. No matter how much nostalgia tried to rewrite the story, sometimes he would walk through the city at night, his hands in his pockets, the air cool against his skin, and wonder what might have been if things had been different. But then he would remind himself, love without respect isn't love at all. It's an arrangement, a habit, a dependency that traps you. The kind of connection he wanted had to be built on mutual value, not just fleeting passion or shared memories. And if that meant waiting longer or walking alone for a while, so be it. Over time, he realized that the love he had been searching for wasn't just about finding the right person, it was about becoming the kind of man who would never again compromise his dignity to keep someone close. His worth wasn't up for debate, not anymore. He stopped entertaining situations where his boundaries were tested, stopped explaining why respect mattered, and simply started living in a way that made it clear. The change wasn't loud or dramatic, it was in the way he carried himself. The way he spoke, the way he looked people in the eye without flinching, the transformation was undeniable. People who once took advantage of his patience now approached him with caution. Those who once doubted his strength began to see it in every word he said, in every choice he made. He no longer reacted to disrespect with anger. He simply removed himself from the space where it was allowed to exist. That quiet, uncheckable decision-making became his power. In the end, he didn't regret the love he had given. It had taught him more about himself than any easy path ever could. But he did understand now that love is only beautiful when it stands on equal ground. He knew that respect was not something you begged for, it was something you demanded through the way you lived. And as he stood there one evening, watching the sun sink behind the skyline, he felt a deep sense of peace settle over him. He was no longer the man who would trade his self-worth for affection. He was no longer the man who measured his value by someone else's presence in his life. Love would come again, he was sure of it, but when it did, it would meet him where his dignity stood, not ask him to leave it behind. Until that day, he would keep walking forward, head high, heart steady, and soul unbroken. Because in the end, choosing respect over love wasn't just a decision, it was the making of the man he was always meant to be.